Hey guys, it's Matt. Welcome back to the Reality Gives Itself Away series. This is number 3. If you're driving or just listening, you're not missing anything. I'm just going to show one image related to the general topic that I'm talking about for that section. That's all. This one, number 3, is related to, I'm not sure how I'm going to title it, but it's related to how we don't just have thousands of different conspiracies to look at. In each one, there's 2, 3, or even 4 levels of conspiracy. It's a triple layer cake of conspiracy in almost everything we look at. What's the theme of this series? The reality gives itself away. It means no real world could pull this off. Guys, it is remarkable to me how, I don't know, like 95% of what we call our community still just simply looks for answers inside what I call reality bookends, looks for answers inside of known reality. I don't understand how, some of these channel presentations, these people have been around a long time. I mean, how much do you need to see? Just through this Reality Gives Itself Away series, I'm going to show you no real world could keep doing this over and over. No groups of people could keep pulling this off over and over. Everything moves in one direction towards conspiracy, towards mystery. Nothing ever swings back the other way. The pendulum doesn't come back the other way. We never get a win. They never have a breakdown or a major mistake that leads to a massive, quote, wake up in the people around us. It's not natural. It's not possible. So it's kind of like, okay, I've made it clear for 2 years that I'm not going to look for answers anymore inside of my understanding of the bookends as to how this world works from a Wikipedia perspective or from a textbook. I'm going to look for my answers in other places. And it's amazing how much of our community still just looks for answers and it relates back to what I was talking about a few videos back about Tartaria, mud flood. So somebody actually emailed me and said they were completely confused as to what I was presenting. They said, "Matt, you're looking for, why are you looking for a human answer to explain these things like Tartaria mud flood?" And I was like, no, not. I'm saying to the people that constantly present these topics, why are they limiting themselves to a human answer or inside their bookends answer? We've seen too much. I'm not going to. I don't understand why anybody would even hang out at channels that are just operating inside of the cabal must have done this, or the cabal must have always relates back to men and women running around, the cabal, secret societies, Freemasons. That's continuing to operate inside the reality bookends. I just don't understand it at this point. And in fact, that's probably why the Freemasons and these other secret societies in this community get the blame for absolutely everything. From the reality's perspective, if the reality is out to remove a human being from understanding its true spiritual nature, okay, we've been over that 1,000 times. We're not going to cover that here. It's very simple what's going on here. Your job is to find yourself. From the reality's perspective, you can say, if we can get these people that see more than most to believe that it's always this cabal, it's always the OTO and the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons and these secret societies, then they'll just limit their understanding to just men and women running around in the old school recruitment van. That's what's going on. That's why the Freemasons, they get blamed for everything. From the reality's perspective, that's fine from the reality's perspective. So if these people are fooled into thinking that it's just these groups doing everything, then let them believe that. Then we can keep them distracted for the rest of their lives. It's pretty much that simple. So the main role of this channel is to show you endless examples that no real world could do this. The world isn't real at all. It's just a complete construct. How close to the actual matrix it is, we don't know. It doesn't really matter. I will do this endlessly, and then I will also back up and remind people that the entire reality is constructed, perhaps it has been hijacked, to hide a human being, what they call us, I don't like the term, from understanding its true immortal spiritual nature, and to get it to focus and grasp and attach to the wrong things. It is that simple. If you're ready to graduate, graduate. But 95% of the truth community that's just talking about Sun Simulator all day and what the cabal's up to, there's a lot more people that need to get into school here. Because once you understand how fake the reality is, then you understand, people will better understand what they need to do for themselves spiritually, in terms of cutting attachments and stop jumping into the bog over and over again into the endless conspiracy that the reality artificially throws at us. All right, Matt, there's a picture of the Titanic. You're going to say something about the Titanic, or I guess you wouldn't have used the picture. Get to it. We got it. Most people here do get it, but I just have to say that every so often. So, yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Let's get to it. So with Titanic, there's three major levels. There's level one, everybody that went in to see the movie about Jack and Rose and crunched their popcorn and what Wikipedia tells you, and the tragic story of its maiden voyage, and it was the grandest ship in the whole world. And Jack, hold on to the ice. Don't leave Rose alone, Jack. And Maurizio's like, has anybody seen my friend Jack? That offensive presentation. You have that whole bullshit going on that 99.99999% of everybody believes in, and that's what, oh yeah, it's exactly what they said happened. Sure it is. Yeah. But then you look into it for about 10 minutes, and then all this conspiracy starts to pop up, like any real world could pull this off over and over and over again. You say, well, wait a second. It was about the insurance money. See, nobody knows about this sister ship called Olympic. And they put Olympic to sea 6 months to 7 or 8 months prior, and it had all sorts of problems and accidents, and it had a big, huge accident with a Royal Navy ship and got a big bulge in its side, and it listed off to the right, and it became an absolute piece of shit, this Olympic. But I don't understand. If the Olympic was put to sea 6 months prior to the Titanic being finished, and they were sister ships, exactly twins, why wasn't there a big fanfare about Olympic being the grandest ship in the world? Why don't we hear about that? Oh, I don't. That's part of the conspiracy too. The real world that can keep pulling that off over and over again. But for the story is the Titanic, the grandest ship in the world. We don't hear a damn thing about Olympic. The Olympic got so banged up it became just a big floating piece of shit. Imagine, the Pacific Princess, the Love Boat, on its absolute last day after Isaac doing heroin behind the bar for 20 years. So they just switched the names, and they just switched the linens, and then they sent Olympic out as Titanic, and then they faked a sinking. They sunk that piece of shit, calling it Titanic, for the insurance money. And just out of coincidence, just happened to be owned by J.P. Morgan's White Star Lines. You bring one of the monster. Here we go again. But there is a real cabal. There is a real set of creeps at the highest level. I'm not saying that level doesn't exist. I'm saying they don't pull as many strings as you think they do. There's a whole other world going on here, is what I'm saying. You just can't blame everything on them. But do the creeps and names like J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller and Melvin P. and Rothschild, do they come into play as players in this reality system? Of course they do. I'm not saying that level doesn't exist and it's just out to help people. Don't misconstrue my words. So of course, I'm saying J.P. Morgan's involved, and it was just about. But then you look into it and you say, well, that's a little too tame, that conspiracy. What else is going on? Hey, honey, look at this. It just so happens that the three leading billionaires on board that were opposed to the Fed, that I think were going over to the United States to oppose the establishment of the Federal Reserve, all three of them just happened to die on board Titanic. What are the chances of that? Astor, Strauss, and the Guggenheim Museums all were against the Fed, and they just happened to go. They were obviously murdered, and the whole Titanic was part of that story. Then you look into that, and you jump into that bog, and it leads to even more conspiracy and more conspiracy. And you have me thinking I have it all figured out 4 years ago, saying, remember that scene in the movie Titanic when they took Jack below and they chained his ass up, or they put his wrist to that pipe, and then they abandoned him, and he's like, Rose, get the axe, and I got her axe, and just aim here, Rose, you can do it, Rose, you're so stupid, Rose. And she hits without any practice at all, just misses his the jugular vein that would exist in his wrist, and just takes the chain right off. And I said, wait a second. Matt was so genius 4 years ago. I said, that's them showing us what happened with that, they took Guggenheim, Astor, and Strauss below and chained them up. Well, maybe, but at this point, with the endless conspiracy on top of each other, I don't buy it anymore. It's all part of the reality construct. And I guarantee you, the way this reality does business, I guarantee you, if you looked into it and you spent, I mean, you really would have to look hard at this point, but if you spent another, 2 years researching all other aspects of Titanic, you would find another one or two other major conspiracies that you could throw into the mix. There's no doubt about it. I don't know what they would be, but this is how the reality does business. Okay, I'll start going through these a little bit more quickly. If you're driving, it's Lee Harvey Oswald being paraded through, being paraded through the Dallas police, just like anybody newly arrested would be paraded through endless press, just walked up and down the corridors and the hallway like they were trying to accomplish something. That's all part of the multifaceted conspiracy. But here we have three major layers, but inside one layer, you have at least 6 or 7 layers of conspiracy. So overall, it's close to 10 layers if you add it all up of conspiracy. And of course, everybody was kept quiet. There's been no major leaks or mistakes by anybody that's touched this story over now almost a 60-year, is it 60 years? Almost. Wow. Almost a 60-year period. No major leaks, no major breakthroughs where hundreds of millions of people around the world wake up to what the cabal could do. It just keeps pulling it off beautifully over and over again. So layer 1, okay, let's just call layer 1 the Jack and Rose layer. I don't have to present the official story of what happened to JFK at Dealey Plaza. I think everybody knows that. When I say Jack and Rose, that's what the guy down the cul-de-sac believes. And well, Matt, even people down the street are starting to question JFK. I hear you. But there's level 1 that would be presented on the news. Then level 2, inside of this one, you have all the different possible culprits that the system intentionally put out to lead people on different breadcrumb chases in a million different areas. Been over this a million times, be really quick. It was Castro because of Bay of Pigs. It was the mob because of what RFK was investigating. It was the military-industrial complex did it to JFK because he was going to get us out of Vietnam. The Fed did it because he was going to audit the Fed. And all this ridiculous breadcrumb chase over and over and over again. See, what the unnatural, one of the main points of these presentations is to point out that it's unnatural or no real world could keep the level of conspiracy up and keep getting away with it over and over and over again, decade after decade after decade. It doesn't break down. So how impossible, I mean, this by itself gives the reality away. How impossible is it that if you were a college student in 1968 and you're looking into whodunit, or 1970, and it's still very fresh in everyone's mind, and you're talking about, well, the mob did it because of RFK and all the people he put in jail, and you'd have this whodunit group, and everybody knows who it is. I'm missing probably 1 or 2. Now, you would think as decades go by, you'd say, well, that group, we've eliminated that group. It couldn't have been them. It couldn't have been them. We've narrowed it down to 2 main groups. But in 2022, we basically have the same whodunit cast of characters. Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There's been no progress. Of course there's been no progress because none of these breadcrumbs lead anywhere. But I'm just saying, even if the system is laying down the breadcrumbs, you would think groups of people would be like, I'm not investigating that aspect anymore. The people have written full books on each of the bullcrap breadcrumb trails. When what really happened or didn't really happen, to me, what happened is just like I talk about in Jarhead when they're on the way to Iraq War I. Guy announces that he did get to the 10th level of Metroid. And then what really happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And you could apply what he says about the 10th level of Metroid, in my opinion, to what happened at Dealey Plaza. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But it doesn't matter for the purpose of this presentation. It's just saying how you can have multiple layers of conspiracy that continue to attach themselves to each one of these topics decade after decade. Nothing ever goes away. Nothing ever swings back in the other direction, and we never get a win. No real world could do this. With the Vatican and Rome, there are 3 or 4 major levels of conspiracy and hundreds of levels of micro layers of conspiracy. If you trace it back through Constantine and the Roman Empire, hundreds of levels. This just came to mind. It popped up. Anybody driving, it's the Pope. We've been over this. Yeah, we had to graduate through these levels. 5, 6 years ago, the Pope's audience hall with the snake image, the reptilian image. If your camera's set a certain way from the front of the auditorium with the side windows, make a snake with fangs, and the weird, creepy 10-ton statue behind the Pope of Jesus getting blown up in a nuclear explosion. Literally, the artists say it's Jesus rising out of a nuclear explosion. There's no images, pictures, or Christian memorabilia or artifacts are on the walls or around the audience hall. It's very sterile, other than the reptilian signature. Let's just back up for a second here and say, well, wait a second. What's more likely, that we just uncovered this? And I remember, I forget the name of the channel, and I appreciate the work that's been done. Of course, I don't want to go without knowing about this, but now you have to step back and see the bigger picture, that we just uncovered this. And see, the Pope really had to have, via the audience hall and other things, he really had to have a tribute to lizard people and reptilians and snakes. And the shape of the Pope's audience hall from above, from a helicopter, looks like a snake's head. They just had to have that. So you believe that, or that it's almost more likely, even though this isn't the greatest explanation in the world, it's there so you notice it. It's there to get your attention. And one of two things will happen. You will either get through the bog, come out of it, as we're doing now, or you will get more deeply entrenched in the bog. That's where most people end up. So, no, the Pope and all his architects and all the people, whenever this was put together, this audience hall that was way before Francis, and I'm just talking about one level of conspiracy inside the Vatican. How about the Jesuits? Is there any conspiracy associated with that? What, hundreds and hundreds of different topics? You go back to... And even the name, Pontius, I don't have it right, Pontius Maximus is the name of the Pope, and that was the name of Julius Caesar, Pontius Maximus. I'm not getting that exactly right, but there's hundreds of layers of conspiracy. There's no real world that could do this over and over again. So the Pope, his architects, his advisors, they just had to they had to make sure that the reptilian signatures just came flowing through, so people one day would discover. They just had to have that. Why would they have to have that? Matt, you don't understand how their magic works. And there's something to be said about that. If where you're going is they have to put it in plain sight for whatever the creepy stuff they're up to for it to work. Okay, there is some merit to that. But to me, as it's not, if you go into the bog on the Vatican, fine, you go into the bog and you'll have a way to explain everything. But if you have to go back and look down at all this madness from 100,000 feet up and look down at all and see how it all is working together. It's all colluding together, all these different conspiracies to get your attention, to have you jump into the bog and chase it. That needs to be the big picture perspective. I'm showing pictures of the moon, but it's meant to represent space in general. And this one, not only are there probably 1,000 conspiracies associated with all of these topics as they branch off, but there's huge levels of conspiracy as you go from the macro down to the micro. They just come along for the ride. So in terms of what space is, what's out there, what's a nebula, obviously we all know the endless conspiracies associated with that, where the reality, again, magically and mysteriously plays Goldilocks, gives everybody that wants to find out or look into it in a certain way or expose NASA, it gives them all the breadcrumbs it needs. It gives them all the information that they need to continue their research or to reaffirm their belief set. Where the guy down the cul-de-sac, he believes that Neil Armstrong really was a great man, and he'll get, whenever he does his research, the reality will put into his hands everything he needs to hold on and believe what he believes. Now, you have the whole what is space thing, but then as you get smaller and smaller, the conspiracy doesn't ever end. Then let's just go one level down, the moon. But, we could talk about, is there any conspiracy associated with Saturn and Jupiter? Yeah, like 1,000 things, but let's just jump down a huge level to the moon. The conspiracies associated with the moon, of which everybody knows what they are, but think of something like Crow's lunar wave just popping up. You know, I just said the blue, the reality's going to have Crow film a lunar wave, and that's going to come in and make the bog. Not that we're going to see, I don't see it, I see it 179.5 degrees away from the way most people would. I don't see it as, well, Matt, that gave us a clue as to what's really going on. No, in my opinion, that's the reality showing its millionth breadcrumb. It's getting us to even jump further into the bog. I see it the exact opposite way. And I'm sorry to pick on that example. I find that example fascinating when I watched it 3 or 4 years ago. But you could pick anything. No, it's meant to grab your attention and to pull you further into the bog. That's the way I see it. It's the reality itself generating the endless conspiracy. So then go down to another micro layer, the ISS. There's tons of conspiracy associated just with that. Well, then how, Matt, if it's so bullcrap, well, how come there's amateur photographers that they can see something when it's predicted to transverse the moon or transverse the sun? Some amateur even photographers can find it where it's supposed to be, and something goes across. Well, I know that when they show the big-haired women up there doing their hair and the hairspray and the hairnet and the aquanet and all this bullcrap, it looks, and they're running around with gorilla costumes playing guitar, it looks like ridiculous, and we see guys floating around on wires. But then what's going across the sun and the moon when these guys are filming it? How's that work? Well, the Earth must have a natural satellite. It's endless, and it's all bullshit. I'm showing thumbnail images of the Statue of Liberty, and I guess the theme or the title of this video when I came in was like everything has 2 or 3 or 4 levels of conspiracy embedded. Well, you find really most things have like 100 layers if you really want to break it down to the micro layer. So we've all known this one. Again, don't remember the whole context here, that you have what the masses are presented with, the ones that go and take the tour buses, and oh, she represented liberty. And most people don't know that she has chains broken on her feet, and that was France's way of appreciating what America did to end slavery. Most people don't know that, and the person in the tour group that puts that information forth as they go, oh, wow, that person is really well read, like the Fromer's tour guide dude in Eurotrip. But then it's like, well, so if there's a conspiracy person in the tour, it says, well, what does she represent? I mean, do you think it's a coincidence that she's in the exact same pose of one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, the Colossus at Rhodes, to represent the sun god Apollo? And did you know that that's not a crown, but the rays of the sun? She's in the same pose as the sun god Apollo, and therefore she is Apollo. And why are they paying a tribute to ancient Greek gods of the sun and pagan rite and ritual? And the face just happens to play, the Goldilocks, where we see a man's face clearly. I mean, you don't have to make the nose, if you got up there and climbed across it, you don't have to make the bridge of the nose 10 feet across. Go look at, in South Dakota, Mount Rushmore. Whoever you believe these figures to be, they can be carved, a face can be carved exactly of what it's supposed to look like. And stone would be a lot harder to work with than a metal that can be shaped. You don't have to have the bridge of the nose, a classic Roman's man's nose, or Rocky Balboa that has been broken. The bridge of the nose been broken 10 times in fights with, what was his name? The guy that washed dishes in a later, Spider. His name was Spider. Spider broke Rocky's nose. So you can, if you wanted to make a female face, you could make one. It doesn't have to look like a man. So you get that conspiracy. No, and then of course a whole segment of the truth community rises up out of their bathtub and they swoop in. Matt, that's Lucifer. Remember the whole point of this presentation. It's meant to be 100 different things to 100 different people looking into it. It's reality molding to what you expect to find, like the Event Horizon spaceship. And remember the theme, this can't happen in no real world. Maybe one time, but not 1,000 times over and over and over again. Please pass that message along to the rest of the truthers. Inside major events, multiple layers, major layers of conspiracy. If you break it down to the smaller levels, 100 different layers. And let's not do the same one over and over and over again. We're all familiar with the part-time job. Let's do Oklahoma City. I haven't looked at that for a while. Does anybody here believe that this one is not going to be riddled with conspiracy? Does anybody believe this one can just buck that trend? No? Then the reality itself's doing this somehow. That's all you need to know. Let's just look at this is one we haven't looked at in a while. And my favorite weird anomaly associated with this one, of course, there's many, and I'm not an expert at this at all, but is it 91? I think it's 91. There's the governor of Oklahoma at the time was a guy by the name of Frank Keating, and he had a brother named Martin Keating. And Martin Keating, right around the time, okay, most people put it just before the event, some put it just after, or a revision to the book. We'll talk about that, but let's just go with the strange anomalies that keep coming. Or my favorite one, Martin Keating wrote The Final Jihad, and in the book there is a Tom McVeigh. In the book, the brother of the governor of Oklahoma who presided over this event, Frank Keating, in his book was Tom McVeigh, spelled different than Tim McVeigh, but one's Tim McVeigh, one's Tom McVeigh. Tom McVeigh gets pulled over, and that leads to his arrest. Tim McVeigh gets pulled over, leads to his arrest. Tim McVeigh then the whole reality, of course, has to tie together, and the fractal nature of it has to attach to the other fractal parts of it through at least a linkage from event to event. Tim McVeigh, the quote real person, the real culprit, he's put to death on 6/11. 2001, and what all you got to do that 6 is just flip it 6/11 2001. That's when he was put to death, right? Yeah. So then there's some when it's for some reason it's hard to determine if this was quote written right prior to the event or the revision was after but included these linkages. Either way, it's even more weird if it's after, because what kind of sick individual, the brother of the governor, maybe he was just out to embarrass the governor, right? What kind of sick individual would go revise a book and mimic the events of something that just happened that killed hundreds of people? And that's even sicker if the reality played that game. But either way, thought we just look at something a little bit different this time, and I'm certainly no expert at it. And I don't want to revisit it. We don't need to revisit it. We know how the reality plays its games. Next topic, CERN. We haven't really dabbed into this bog for a while, and the idea is to get into the bog as quickly as possible. Take a nice mud bath and then get the heck out. The Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Cernunnos. Does anybody out there believe there's not going to be multiple levels of conspiracy embedded in this one? No, nobody? Oh, good. No, you're starting to understand. There are exactly multiple levels. Start right with the logo, the 666 in the logo, and then you have the legend of where this place is, the site that it was built on, related to Cernunnos, and all the pagan creepiness associated with that, and then what's actually being done with this smashing of particles, and then you throw in the Mandela effect, and one of their particle colliders, or a section of it, is called Alice. And then you have the whole story about a weasel got in and shut the entire thing down about 5 years ago. Of course, it's the story isn't real. The weasel in some way has symbolism. They got to play that out. And then you got Shiva out front in its destruction pose. Shiva, the creator and the destroyer, but in this pose, it's the destroyer of worlds. And you've got to have that worked in. And it's endless. And then oh yeah, that's right. It's potentially blamed for the entire Mandela effect. People just seeing reality change in front of their very eyes. It's blamed for the Mandela effect. And you would think reality it would say that's good enough. We need to do any more. Reality, a two-headed dragon's talking to itself. We need to do more. Yeah, more, with us? Yeah, we need to do even more in terms of these breadcrumbs that these dumbasses will chase. We need to. Sally Field will be one of the biggest Mandela effects, and then we're going to have her brother work in the place. Well, he's gonna. What did he just sweep floors there? Sally Field brother, Sally Field from Smokey and the Bandit. Yeah, her brother. Just put him out there and sweep floors so we can make the link. No, he's a CERN scientist. If you believe that, and then the endless discussion and debate of like, well, who would prove this thing initially? How do you get the funding for this when government budgets are squeezed? And there's a whole conspiracy that branches out there that governments don't need money and all the central banks are tied in together. How do you get the initial funding for this? If the world worked like Wikipedia says, if in any way it was real, you'd have to have a team of scientists like Ellie Arroway in contact. They'd go around to all these rich people and be like, "We'd like to study the origins of the universe." How? Oh, that's interesting. How much money do you need? We need about $100 billion. And well, how big is the device? You just put it behind somebody's farm? No, it stretches into 2 countries underground. It's basically, like digging the channel 5 times over. Well, what about all the permits and all the red tape to dig under people's farms and homes and private land? Oh, we've seen to that. There's 2 levels of reality: what the regular people need to do, and the permit that Matt needs to put on when he has to dig post holes. He's got to go get a permit to dig post holes, and the guy comes down and he literally comes and puts a ruler in. Says, this hole, it's 36 inches, the damn frost line. This hole is 34 and a half inches. He said, but I'll let you go. Just try to get some more dirt out of it. Get me closer to 36. Like this, why does the damn hole have to even be 36, the frost line? This ain't outer Siberia. No frost in Pennsylvania goes down even 15 inches into the ground. This ain't Novosibirsk, Russia. I mean, and you're not going to let me continue pouring my cement if I don't have it 36 inches. I got to do that, but they can build this fucking thing under 87,000 farms across Switzerland and France. I'm sure with just some farmers complaining to local authorities, like, what's that rumbling and digging under my? Oh yeah, they're digging this thing called the Large Hadron Collider that runs like miles and miles and miles from France into Switzerland and comes back. Like, well, they need to get approval for this? Or what about the red tape? What about my compensation? Just, sir, don't say anything. Go back to your farm, milk your cows, and shut up. This thing's bigger than all of us. It's going to get dug. And if you don't like it, we'll take your fucking land. I'm showing pictures of the Live Aid concert, 1985, Wembley Stadium at the same time, or I guess just before it started, Philadelphia's JFK Stadium, which I was actually in once before they tore it down. They probably tore down the JFK Stadium around 88, probably. They probably like that number. It was an old football stadium. Bench seats held about 85,000 people. That's where Live Aid took place. And somebody's saying, surely there isn't tons of embedded conspiracy in a concert. No. Well, I guess it's pretty obvious I wouldn't be making this part of the presentation if it didn't have it. But yeah, I'm not really that prepared to talk about it now. I have a whole section in the book, but you basically have Live Aid, which was a benefit concert, of course, for Africa, the starvation of, is it Somalia or Ethiopia, the famine, of course. Is anybody surprised when they looked into it years later, about 95% of the funds were squandered, never made their way to help anybody? Is anybody surprised? But that's not even, that is a layer of conspiracy. That's a pretty big conspiracy, but that's not even what I'm talking about. It's much grander. That basically this was the introduction of a new era of AIDS and Live Aid. Live with AIDS. And this is, okay, it's a stretch to some people if they're stumbling upon a video like this. And I don't have all the facts because it's in my book, but there's no doubt about it that they use the AIDS. The most famous part of the Live Aid concert, the performance by Freddie Mercury of Queen, who would soon after become the celebrity face of AIDS. So the number one guy for Live Aid is soon to become the number one guy for AIDS. You can't make this up. What else? There's a lot of other things, if I could just remember from my book. You have, just the name itself. I mean, you have Freddie Mercury, with Mercury and Jupiter being there are 2 astrological gods, what we call the creeps. I'm no expert at that, but I'm taking Levette's advice for that. You have the name Queen in the band. You have, if you look up, if it's 1985, well, who was playing in the NBA Finals in 1985? Any coincidence? It's Magic Johnson of the Lakers versus Larry Bird of the Celtics. Who's the number one celebrity sports person that would become the face of AIDS? Magic Johnson. Same year as Live Aid plays against Larry Bird. Magic Johnson. Last name is another name for a penis. Larry Bird. Last name is another name for a penis. This is how the reality fractal works, folks, weaving its way through most people that have no idea how they're carrying out its weird and perverted wishes. Pick a relatively recent president. Of course, multiple levels of conspiracy are going to be weaved in. So let's just look at Donald Trump. There's even more associated with Barack Obama. There's not as much conspiracy, it seems, associated with Biden. He's just plain dumb, and he has that stuff where he likes to, move his hands around. I don't know what I can say, but there's all that, and there's things he said, and the gaffes. He said to a group of a mostly black audience, if you vote Republican during these midterms, they're going to put y'all back in chains. All that stuff, that's all part of... There's no normal presentation that can ever be made. It has to be riddled with all sorts of problems and conspiracy. But let's just look at Trump quickly. Of course, you have his uncle or whatever his relative was the guy that on behalf of the U.S. government or something went in to collect all the Tesla materials and Tesla works. And again, I don't buy these crafted stories, and I've said a lot recently. The what Tesla is presented to us as, I just don't buy it. It's too much of a perfect story that there's this one altruistic person that came up with all these inventions, and we'd have free energy today, and we have this and that. I'm sure they have all this technology, and they keep it from us. But it's always put on Tesla, and that he was shunned and he was made a pauper, and the government screwed him over. And who knows? Who knows? It's possible. And if the guy really was working for us, I guess I apologize. But everything to me nowadays seems like a story. So Trump's uncle was the guy that just happened to be the guy associated with all the Tesla secret documents and all this bull crap. And then you get into like the reality, probably the two-headed dragon said to itself, well, there's not enough conspiracy associated with Trump. There's all his dirty dealings. If you look into his business dealings and bankruptcies and all this stuff, and the two-headed dragon said to itself, we have to do even more. The reality two-headed dragon says, we have to even more? Yeah, we have to create this whole, and we'll push it back through time, I guess. We'll talk to those who arranged the Mandela effect and CERN. But I don't know how reality pulls this off. We'll talk about that some other time. But is anybody surprised? The Ingersoll Lockwood books, Barron Trump's Marvelous Journey, where his kid's name is Barron. How many kids do you know named Barron? And what are the chances? Barron Trump. And it probably wouldn't be that significant if the same guy, this Ingersoll Lockwood, didn't write a book called The Last President, where the last president had his residence was on basically the exact same spot in New York City where the Trump Tower is. Give me a break. It's a reality script, and it's emerged as being incredibly artificial. And I'm sure there's some things I'm forgetting about Trump. The Obama story is even more ridiculous. And if anybody, just to do a little sidebar, somebody said, well, Matt, there were certain presidents in the past that you didn't seem to have the conspiracy, or it wasn't as apparent, and their presentations were more believable and professional. And no doubt, it seems to be breaking down over time, or the absurd has to be attached into all relatively recent stories and events and presentations, where, like I've said many times, the presentations in the past weren't as absurd. And that, I don't want to stray too much. That gets into the nature of the reality game tractor pull, where, it has to always work towards, as time goes on, it always has to move in a straight line towards the absurd, so people are given the opportunity to just eventually see through it and to say, I'm not participating in this anymore. It seems to be, like, for lack of better words, contractually what's going on here. So even though Woodrow Wilson might even be a bigger creep than some of these recent creeps, Trump and Obama and Biden. There's no difference. I mean, I saw somebody with a Trump hat out recently, and people are still putting their hope into Trump. I mean, it's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. They're all actors working for the exact same team. But, Woodrow Wilson, you could argue is the biggest creep of all time. But the presentation was more professional, and I doubt you would find the endless conspiracy, because the endless conspiracy is what the reality today has to deliver, or the post 7/11 2001 A Space Odyssey reality has to deliver. It's a yin and yang. They're going to try to take bigger bites over here. The absurdity has to come along with it, where they were screwing over a lot of people, of course, in the day of Woodrow Wilson, but I don't think anybody would say they're nearly taking as big of bite as they're taking now. So I'm sorry to stray so much about why the reality operates the way it operates. With this, and the point here is just to see that this one aspect alone gives the world away as not being real. That there's multiple conspiracy in every single thing we look at. And I don't know, I get to one or two more. Could do this all day, day after day, 500 things. Could do the same thing over and over and over. This is just some list I jotted down. I could do this all day long. If it was just this, it would give the reality away. I'm going to keep this under an hour. It could go on for 40 hours straight. In this segment, I want to talk about the Bang events and the scripts and the same themes that have to run through all of them, or at least through many of them, and how reality gives itself away there. So I can't show an associated picture. Maybe I can, but I try to play it safe. So I just put in Land of the Lost, and I put in Land of the Lost from the 80s, and actually a 70s show. Top left, I don't think that can be real. It's got to be photoshopped. It says Land of the Lost Reunion Show, which Chaka would be like 120 years old by now. But no, he was actually pretty young. He would even look more like an armpit today. But was it Marshall, Will, and Holly on a routine expedition? I'm not sure. Like, weren't they his kids, right? Marshall's kids, I guess. You go on a routine. It's not Lewis and Clark, a routine expedition. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, wouldn't it be better if they just went off as a family camping or something? I don't know. Whatever. Just let it go. Actually, guys, I was thinking about something, and it led me to the newest or the latest King Kong movie or two. The original Land of the Lost did really present the theme more than anything else in mainstream media or mainstream pop culture, whatever you want to call it, television. The theory that could be an inner Earth. I mean, there's no doubt the reality wants people pondering that until they become old men and old women. So the Land of the Lost was a catalyst more than anything else for people to get interested in inner Earth. I knew a guy once. He passed, but he was huge into this. Into the concept of Dyson sphere, and of course, for his 25 years of his conspiracy research, the reality fed him everything that he wanted to find. The whole, we talk about that. They talk about, is it Mount Meru, where there's a hole of the blood over intent people. There's a hole up north. And there's a whole world. That's where the Aurora Borealis comes from. So the Land of the Lost was big in pushing this concept. But the recent King Kong movies have brought this back as well. I know the one versus Godzilla is huge on a whole world exists inner Earth. I'm not sure about the one with Brie Larson. I started to watch a little bit of it, and my two favorite characters, Samuel L. Jackson. I said, again? Oh my gosh, he's in another movie? And then Brie Larson. I was, oh no, if this is the thing that King Kong falls in love with Brie Larson, I won't be able to take it. But I think that had introduced some King Kong coming from, or at least it was a magical land off maps or something like that. So it's almost like at least the most recent King Kong movie is trying to introduce back into the reality a whole new, rekindle or revitalize the inner Earth or a whole world inside the Earth conspiracy, the way really Land of the Lost introduced us to it in the mid 70s. But Land of the Lost, I mean, there's some major truth drops in that show. I mean, no doubt about it. Especially the one where he has, where they come across that Sleestack, who's from, is it? He's supposed. It seems like he's from the future because he's 1,000 times smarter than the other Sleestacks. But I think he's from the past, right? And the Sleestacks there are his future. I don't know, but it is it was absolutely a great show to get kids thinking. I mean, really using their noggin in the 70s. Okay, yeah, it's this one. This is some sort of hyper-intelligent Sleestack. I think, if I remember correctly, he says he's from the... And guys, I don't remember from the 70s, but I did cover this episode maybe even back on the old Texas Shrugged channel. It was a long time ago, but I think he says he's from the future. No, he's from the past. And they can move through these crystals and portals, Land of Lost. They can move through time and dimension, and the Sleestacks of the mindless creatures that are always trying to get Marshall, Will, and Holly that just hiss, shh, shh. The ones that just hiss, that can't carry on a very intelligent conversation here, like Enoch. Is his name Enoch, like Book of Enoch? Enoch, or it says Enoch. Maybe it's a play on that. E-N-I-K, I think it says here. Either way, he's saying these Sleestack are my future. I think he says we lost our way or the society broke down. Either way, it's incredible introduction to sci-fi for kids. When I must have seen this for the first time when I was 8 or 9 years old. I mean, mind-bending stuff for kids. And I think maybe this was a genuine attempt at creativity by real people trying, and it's not always, everything isn't, especially in the 70s, not completely AI, not milked managed, but there was still some sort of creep element here. The creep said, "Do you see this show? What they're trying to do to kids? They're trying to. This is the Not Milk Control Center. Wasn't as grand back in the 70s, probably as the Control Center now in Chernobyl Center. But it's like this show is actually going to expand the minds of kids. We can't have that." Little George Soros pipes up, "No, we can't have that. We can't have that at all. Shut it down. Take it off the air." Even though I'm sure every kid loved this, it didn't have a really long run. I don't think it went off. The Not Milk probably came in and said, "Shut that down. We can't have kids seeing that. It actually expands the mind, gets people to think outside of the confines of the known reality we want to force feed them." So that's probably what happened to Land of the Lost. Anyway, do I have time to do the bang segment? I gotta leave it there, guys. Look, the main, I started to stray at the end, but the main point here is, remember all those post-it notes all over the wall, hundreds and hundreds on each wall, and just throw a dart, and whatever the major topic is or the presentation from authority, it's going to have 3 or 4 major layers of conspiracy, and at the smallest level, at the micro level, it could have 50 layers of conspiracy, where the Jack and Rose presentation is there for the regular people at the same time, presented by Encyclopedia Britannica and the news. If it happens 1 or 2 times in a lifetime, but now we're up to 1,000, and same thing said over and over. I'm gonna just keep. I know it's me being repetitive, but where are the other truth channels on this? How come the other truth channels, you don't hear the words reality breakdown? You don't. The Mandela Effect channels do, of course, because that's the whole point of the Mandela Effect. Reality just changes in front of your very eyes. But the other channels, they always talk about everything is real. I mean, they have to. I mean, I don't see how you can be involved in both channels, guys. Either you see that this is a completely faux construct of some kind, or you think the men in black are running around doing everything. I don't see how you can kind of follow both paths at the same time. If I'm going to explore reality one way and most of the truth community is going to explore it another way, I just don't understand. I don't understand how anybody can hold on to that old mindset. Maybe I'm missing something, but the channels I come across, I don't hear words like reality breakdown. I don't hear words like no real world could pull this off. That's much more. There's many, many more things going on here that are 1,000 times more mind-boggling than just this cabal. I don't hear that stuff. I hear the same old bullshit. Thanks, guys.